I greet all of you and I thank you for coming to join my family in celebrating my 80th birthday. First and foremost, I thank God for giving me life and all the blessings He has showered on me, my family, the NRM comrades, the Ugandans, and the Africans over these 80 years, numerous challenges notwithstanding. It must have been God's design that in 1944 I was born among the Banyankole Bahororo, living in the savannah, highland, forest area that the colonial borders put the bigger part of in Uganda and some parts in Rwanda, a place called Omtara, and Tanzania, a place called Chivumbiro, the Kajera Salient. The Banyankole Bahororo were people deeply steeped in wealth creation and a rules-based social order. Anybody that was not involved in wealth creation or did it negligently was regarded as a social misfit, ombaji, a squanderer of wealth in translation, a mugara, lazy, a chirare, a vagabond. With the Banyankole Bahororo, you are to be a wealth creator if you are an adult. The Banyankole Bahororo were engaged in the following emyoga: okulisa, cattle keeping, cattle rearing, okuhinga, cultivating, okuhesha, blacksmithing, okujuba, fishing a bit, not so much, okutanaga, making bows and arrows, okubeija, carpentry, okunogora, okubumba, pottery, okukomaga, back cloth making, although our bakochi neighbors and the Bahaya from Tanzania were the main suppliers of back cloth in Bugo. Each group would excel in their mwoga. Mwoga is a specialization of livelihood. And through Okchulka, barter trade, they would get from the other neighbors what they did not produce and give them what they produced. These societies of the Great Lakes, Ankole Mpororo, Buganda, Bunyoro, Karagwe, Rwanda, etc., were so advanced that the early European travelers that came to these areas were amazed by the level of production. I will quote for you what Henry Morton Stanley wrote in the years 1887 to 1889 when he passed through the Bunyoro Ankole area. On page 298 of his book entitled In the Darkest Africa, Volume 2 by Henry Stanley, he wrote as follows: a march of an hour and a half in the afternoon, apparently not far from the river, brought us to the populous district of the Babusese. The banana plantations were very extensive, reminding me of Uganda. This Stanley had come to Uganda in 1874, to Uganda in 1874. Now this was 1887, some years later, when he was passing through the part of Congo, which was part of Bunyoro, Ituri area. This is populated by Banyoro Batoro people, reminding me of Uganda. And their shades covered a multitude of huts. This was recorded on December 5th, 1887. Fields of millet and sesame, plots of sweet potatoes occupied the outskirts of these plantations. And there was ample evidence roundabout that the land was thickly peopled, thickly populated, and industrially cultivated. End of quotes. This is H.M. Stanley writing in 1887 about Bunyoro. It's now, this part is now in Congo, but it is populated by Banyoro. Later on, while traveling through the Ruiz area of Ankole, on page 371 to 372 of the same book, he wrote as follows: crossing, this is in quotes, crossing a narrow neck of land, descended into the basin of the Ruiz, that river which you are drying up, you fellows, in Mbarara. By degrees, the misty atmosphere of this region was clearing, and we could now see about 5 miles distance, and the contour of the pastoral plateau of Ankoli. He was calling it Ankoli, of Ankoli. It was not by any means at its best. It was well into the drought season. He is writing Old English. It was drought season, dry season. The dry season had commenced 2 months previously. Hilly range, steep cone, hammock, and plain were clothed with grass ripe for fire, dry grass. The herds were numerous and all as fat as prize cattle. In the valley, we had passed over 4,000 cattle of the long-horned species. The basin of the Ruiz, which we were now in, and which was heart of Ankoli, possessed scores of the finest herds of cattle I had never seen before. End of quote. This is H.M. Stanley writing in 1889. As you will see later, this heritage of being part of the Wealth Creation Society shaped my attitudes to society, politics, and the world. Secondly, the Banyankwere Bahoro Society was a rules-based society. We have a comprehensive code of life for everything. The way you talk. The way you talk. Okanagamaga mahumo. The way you sit. The way you eat. If you put foods in two cheeks at the same time, the way you relate to others, the way you fight, etc., etc. People are talking of no revenge, no. This is part of some of those traditions of your people which you don't study carefully. The Banyankwere despise okugurukira. To surprise somebody and you attack him. You will never be welcomed anywhere. So when we were warning UPC, for them, I don't know what they thought. But we thought it was our duty to warn UPC. You remember how how we were warning them. The modern Ugandans, including the religious leaders, could do well to attend to this aspect. It is all right to talk about general principles about discipline, spirituality, etc. However, the question is, what are the details? I see a big gap there. By going to the school system, I benefited a great deal through reading the Bible, studying history, geography, nature study, which later on turned out to be science, biology, politics, etc. By 1956, still at Chamate Primary School, in Primary 4, I had started following global events. Through a Nyankole language newspaper, Wamanya, I followed the Suez Crisis and the resignation of Anthony Eden as the Prime Minister of UK. We had a newspaper called Wamanya, and by reading it I was able to follow this story of the Suez Crisis of 1956. There was a globe in one of the classrooms. I was surprised to see much of the globe colored red, which showed the expanse of the then Soviet Union. Who were the USSR? We were told that Russia, as the Banyankore were calling it, they were not calling it Russia, but Russia, or Russia, was a very powerful country. Still at Chamate, through the wonderful Wamanya, I partially followed the story of the Uganda football team that went to England to play football barefooted, a phenomenon that surprised the British. By the time I arrived in Mbara High School in 1959 for Junior Secondary 1, I had mastered all the indigenous technology of cattle keeping and crops husbandry. You people, you underestimate, because I can see why many people make mistakes. They don't have a base, they're just there. But the traditional grounding in our indigenous economy make me very confident that there is nothing you cannot do. However, when I visited the Mbara stock farm, I discovered that we needed to upgrade our production practices, introduce rotational grazing, fencing our land, what Honorable John Kawanga was talking about, killing ticks, growing crops in lines. Banyankole were not growing crops in line, they were just planted zigzag. Making water retention trenches in the gardens, Empazo, etc. When I went to Ntungamo for the April holidays, I told my father about this gap. The 8 years I spent in Mbarara added a lot to my knowledge and attitudes. I knew a lot about the whole world, the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire and its collapse, the Egyptian civilization, the Dark Ages in Europe, the Renaissance, the steam engine, the Industrial Revolution, the slave trade, colonialism, etc. Therefore, by 1966, when I was 22 years old and had just finished the A-level, I had 6 positions in my head. First, I was an expert indigenous wealth creator who had now been exposed to more science, the invisible world of the microbes that were both for evil, like the germs, or for good, like the fermentation, bacteria, and digestion, the barbed wire Sengenge to control the movement of cattle instead of Museveni being the barbed wire to control the cattle that I had been for most of my life. Because I was the Sengenge for our cows. Stop them from going into people's gardens. I'm the one who had to stop them. The only time I've been in court was when I was diverted for football with some other children, and the cows entered somebody's garden, and they started eating the crops, the millet. By the time I came, they had eaten the millet, so I had committed the offense of oponesa, when your cows damage crops. So I was taken to court, Muruka court, under Umutoma, under a ficus tree. And my father coached me, he said, when you go there, you say, Umshango Ningwichiriza. When you go there, you say, I plead guilty. If you do that, it will be easier for you. That's what I did. This was in 1956 when I went to that court. So, by visiting stock farm, I could see that fencing would make with barbed wire would make our life much easier. Better agro practices, the need for joining the money economy, etc. This modernized wealth creator and his compatriots appreciated all the other wealth creators and service providers. We had no time for sectarianism and identity chauvinism, even when we valued our group cultures. Our cattle were being bought by Warisimbi Mpanga, a trader from Kampala for the Kampala market, Bukenya from Mbarara for the Mbarara market, and by Mr. Shea from Ishaka, who was buying cattle for the Chirembe market. And the people who were buying our cattle and giving us money to solve our problems, including paying school fees, were not Banyankole. In other words, the whole Ugandans were contributing to our prosperity. The 4 shops of our Indians in Tungamo, Budara, Hari, Mamdali, and another one whose name I do not remember, plus the 2 Arabs, the Arab shops of Bombakare and his colleagues, were bringing to us cattle salt, soap, textiles, paraffin, etc., and buying on a small scale our milk, ghee, beans, and ground nuts. When my sister, Dr. Kajibiri, I think I saw her here, got polio in 1955, the Banyankole promptly called it a Banyarwanda disease, known as Embasa in Kinyarwanda. Only the Banyarwanda could treat it. Therefore, my mother and Kajibiri had spent some months at Ruawara with the Mnyarwanda known as Kamgunda, where she was being administered with herbs that indeed saw her 85% recovery, both arms, one leg, and half of the other leg completely recovered.